but just run a show. We'll start with a few questions. Also, as you guys have questions and go along, feel free to post them in the chat. We are trying to monitor the chat here in real time, so feel free to do that and make it engaging, interactive. If you dare to, you can even come off mute if that's possible. Sometimes we enable it on Zoom, but definitely the chat, use it. And I think with that, we'll go and kick it off. Cool. I'm very excited to be here. So I'm Nic Kopp, CEO and founder of Rillet, hosting the webinar today with Jeremy Budzian. He is a partner, very senior partner at PwC. We just joked before, I think you've done over 1,000 audits by now, or we're spanning over 2 decades, leading the tech and media comms practice here for PwC. So welcome. We're very excited to have you on here. And then Alex Brockman, who's been a controller of multiple companies, very fast growing companies, and most recently a controller at Luxury Presence, working very closely with Jeremy. These guys know each other for a couple of years now, so you should be in for a treat, and we're very excited to get going here. Welcome.
Thanks, Nick.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Maybe we start with a softer question. I'm curious myself. So tell us to the first time you guys met. We're going off script right off the bat, but I think it could be fun for the audience to know. How did you guys first meet? And maybe, yeah, any anecdotes there?
You want to go first, Alex, or you want me to?
Go for it, Jeremy. Take it away.
All right. So Alex is over at Luxury Presence, and they were a company we were sort of tracking. We love what they were doing in the space and leveraging technology kind of in the real estate space. I work with a number of different like prop tech type companies, and we were excited about what they were doing. And so we kind of reached out and established the connection. One of my partners I work with here in New York, Christina White, we wound up connecting with Alex and his team, and one thing led to another, and we wound up working together here. So I think that was maybe 3-4 years ago now. My memory's right.
Yeah, that's right. Nothing to add there. Got it.
Awesome. And you still stand each other. You still getting along well.
As well as
all
a monitor and a client can do, yes.
Very good, cool. Yeah, no, so excited to have you here. We'll get going with the first question here around just criteria that companies should look for. So we have a lot of folks here on the call that are maybe looking for their first time for an auditor, or potentially looking to switch out an auditor for someone like high caliber as you, Jeremy, and the team at PwC. So what sort of criteria should you be looking for these companies and individuals when going through that journey?
Yeah. So what I would say is, like, look, I mean, all of the big 4 firms, have great people. We all leverage technology. We all have value we can add to our clients. But at the end of the day, like, these are people you're going to be working with. You want to, have a partner that's going to be there with you, help you and the company mature, bring best practices and kind of share that with you. So I think at the end of the day, it's a relationship. A lot of times we work with companies from a very early stage, and it may lead to an IPO, may lead to some other sort of exit event, and you want to have somebody that, like, all of those events will take, you'll get to know each other really well. Sometimes they take longer hours and a lot of collaboration, and so somebody that you really enjoy working with, can build a relationship with, and have that partnership, I think is key. So at the end of the day, it is a people business. We need to have the right technical knowledge, but we're all people that you're working with, so you want to make sure you have that kind of personal rapport. I would say is super important.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
From my perspective, I would say one thing that comes to mind is just that I'm a believer that logo doesn't matter. And what I mean by that, kind of saying what Jeremy said in a different way, in that you are looking for a partner that can grow with you, kind of lead you down that potential IPO readiness path, who's more of a partner, and you're buying that person's services and not necessarily the logo. Having the logo of a big 4 can certainly have its benefits, but ultimately for me, I've historically really set the criteria at who can I work with for the next several years, not just 1, 2, or 3 years, but 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and who could I see kind of bring me along for the journey for high growth companies. And so oftentimes, again, really not necessarily really kind of doing my diligence around, can we work with this person? Can they kind of meet us where we are at as a business? And whether that be a small scale startup looking for your first audit, or maybe mid-stage company kind of closer to IPO, just really having that partner and their team really just meet you where you're at, and kind of help you out that way.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And sorry, Jeremy, were you going to add something to it?
The other thing is, like, particularly if you're working with a bigger firm,
Mhm.
you want to find the right people within that firm. So all of us, have different degrees of practices that work with emerging growth companies. So you don't want to find that person that you may really like them, but all they've worked with is public companies. So they're not going to be able to work with a company well, kind of at this stage, because you want that partner that's going to like roll up their sleeves, right? Much like you all are doing in this space. Like, you can't have a partner flying high level. You want somebody that's going to like roll up their sleeves, get in the trenches with you, help you work through issues, not tell you what to do, but help you, kind of get to the right place. I think that's key. So
Yeah, that's
I
music.
might go one more, Nick, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
It just kind of dawned on me, like, just pure anecdote.
Mhm.
At my last company, where I spent almost a decade, we had Deloitte as our auditor, and we loved our audit partner. We loved our audit team. We had the same audit partner for that entire decade that I was there, and saw exponential growth, that they were there helping us along for the ride. Fast forward to my current company where I'm at, I went in under the impression I was going to go hire Deloitte. So this is kind of, talking out of both sides of my mouth here. I was actually thinking logo at the time, but just based on the partners that I got to know, it was a new partner that I was working with, during kind of the RFP process, and ultimately, again, I was really looking for who is that partner, despite my bias at the time towards Deloitte, given the success I had had with them for almost an entire decade. I met, Jeremy and Christina at PwC. They had kind of taken a few prop tech companies public. They've been in our space before. They understood exactly where we were at, kind of what I said before, kind of meeting us where we're at as a business. And so I did not go with where, down the Deloitte path. And again, it's not really anything about, Deloitte versus PwC versus anybody else. It really was, who can I see partnering with us for the long haul here?
Yep, yep. And I can just empathize and resonate so much also, Jeremy, with one of the statements that I think everybody will maybe, the startup folks definitely on this call will resonate with, is like, so the operational mindedness. We know both of you well. So Alex, you as a customer, and Jeremy, you as a partner. Like, there's just a level of like detail and depth that comes, I think, with both of you individually, and there's nothing more frustrating if you get a lot of high level advice. So I think I'm sure that resonates extremely well with some of the audience here in the room. I was also curious, maybe Alex, one follow-up question to what you just said on like meet people where you're at. You mentioned the prop tech, like industry focus. You mentioned the journey focus. What else? Anything else personality-wise that clicked particularly well with you, or that you're usually looking for? And I appreciate everybody's slightly different, so this may not directly translate to people here in the audience, but still, like, maybe ideas on what they should look out for personality-wise.
Yeah, I hate piggybacking off of the auditors, but I'm going to echo what Jeremy said. I could tell that they were the roll up the sleeves kind of folks who are willing to kind of get down and dirty in the trenches with us. Very like an example that I'm thinking of is when we were thinking about RevRec, and having Christina specifically roll up her sleeves, get in a room with us, and just essentially whiteboard out what our kind of like order to cash flow looks like, what our pricing model looks like, what our product catalog looks like, and just really get a very, very strong understanding of what our business looks like. You could argue an auditor has to do that anyways to be a good auditor of a business, but this was a very just kind of, I would say, like hands-on approach that we saw kind of the grit during our diligence. I think, both Deloitte, PwC, and everybody else we had in our RFP probably hated us because we dragged this on for far too long. Maybe not far too long, but and I specifically spend a lot of time having the conversations. And it's not just necessarily all about fees or timing or things like that. It's some of the intangibles that you're trying to look for. And I think great kind of rolling up your sleeves. Like, can they really be, help us kind of get through some of these tricky earlier stage issues, is a big thing we look out for.
Yeah, awesome, cool. And I would like to, we had a little bit of an agenda prepared here. I'm gonna again, mix it up live. It's sort of like for us, the audience has a lot of questions, so I want to start there. Move one of our questions that would have come up otherwise later a little bit forward, just by David here. Hi, David. Good to see your name pop up. For a first-time early stage audit, maybe Jeremy, you can start there, but Alex, feel free to chime in. How long in advance do you schedule and start that relationship? And what's the best time of the year to actually get that going more generally from a calendar perspective?
Yeah, so I would say like we find, kind of, I'll say the second half of the calendar year, so call it like late summer, early fall is kind of like the right time to kind of find your new provider. You're not in the middle of the year-end close, but you've kind of gotten hopefully the prior year reporting kind of behind you. You're able to kind of start looking ahead. So really like this period of time, or even going back a couple months ago, is to be honest, when we pick up more of our first year audits, it's kind of late summer, early fall. So that's kind of like a good time to start. The new audit firm can come in and make sure they clear their independence, get everything through their client acceptance process and all that. And then you can get all that done and you're like ready to go when you get to year end. So you're not dealing with all the administrative side of things, like on top of trying to close the books and get that first set of financial statements together. So that's tends to be when we see like most companies engaging kind of their new audit firm is call it late summer, early fall, is the typical time frame. And then we don't see much activity kind of in the middle of the winter. There'll always be a company or two that just kind of got behind, it needs to catch up and they have no choice, and they got to sort of figure it out during that period of time. But I don't recommend that. I would say kind of like summertime or early fall is kind of a good time to be doing that. So
That's awesome. Alex, did you follow? It's been a couple of years, so I'm not sure if you remember, but did you actually follow that advice actually, or like when did you guys engage?
Yeah, a couple reactions to that question. It really depends. It depends on your team. One quick rule, like as I heard that question, where my mind went immediately is no audits in the summertime. And that is specifically for me selfishly and my team. I don't want, my junior accountants and everybody on the team kind of having to think about audit requests and polls and reconciliations in the peak of summer when people are thinking about vacation and time off and things like that. So I've kind of ran that rule for over a decade now, and it has worked tremendously. And I think, the folks deeper in the org will appreciate that. What does that mean? Sometimes you actually need maybe, bust your ass a little bit more in the earlier part of the year to make sure you're getting that audit complete. There's no better feeling, quite honestly, kind of going into your, this is more on the personal side, going into your summer, and even on the professional side, if any other projects going on, having that kind of monkey off your back, so to speak, where you're on the other side of that audit. So that's one thing. And then the other thing I would say is, Jeremy says, ready, make sure you're ready to go. I probably can't emphasize that the most. Don't ever sign up for an audit or hire an auditor if you're not ready to go. What does that look like? I think it's different for every company. But actually, at my current company, when I joined, I was the first kind of in-house accounting, hire on the leadership team. The business with a fractional CFO had actually selected an auditor, not PwC, and there was actually an ongoing audit that when I came in, we didn't even have an accrual basis of accounting, an accrual set of books, right? Everything was just basically a cash basis of accounting. And so when I got here, it was very just immediate kind of, we have to put an end to that, convert our books to an accrual basis of accounting, because you're not even ready. You're going to give the auditors effectively garbage. They can't audit it. And if they do, it's just going to create so much back and forth that you'll be in that for many, many months. And so I think doing a lot of legwork up front before you're even maybe engaging the audit partner is really important to set yourself up for success.
Yeah, totally agree with that, Alex. And yeah, I would say totally agree with your summer philosophy. I'll say auditors are people too. We like our summers.
No, they're not. They're not.
So, I would say, look, I mean, and that's where it's tricky, because it's like, we want to, in this space, to find the right audit partner, you need the right balance of somebody who's going to be flexible, because not everything's going to be strict deadlines. You need to be a little bit flexible. But at the same time, you want that audit partner to bring some level of project management, So I, similar to what you like to do, Alex, really like to get audits done by June, ideally even May, so that we can. I found over time, once you hit July 4th, you might as well call it Labor Day. Like it's just going to linger all summer. It's hard to get between, the management team and the audit team. Like people have vacations, and so it doesn't tend to go well if you can't get the audit done by July 4th. I think it tends to like linger through the summer and sometimes even into the fall. So none of us like that. So I recommend to Alex's point, kind of getting the team engaged kind of in that, late summer, early fall time. So they're ready to hit the ground running come, year-end close.
Perfect. And I have one quick, before we go back to the audience question, one quick follow-up also on your statement, Alex, of the prep. I think that could be really helpful for people to hear as well. Obviously, if you're on cash accounting, needing to convert to accrual, like that's maybe a whole different animal. But like, even if you're already sort of in the accrual accounting world, what are the top couple of schedules that you'd really recommend, maybe for both of you even, like that you look at in advance to make sure you're well prepared there?
Yeah, I think the simplest way to answer that is you just walk through your balance sheet and make sure most, if not all, of your I don't even want to say material, because I think it's just good practice to just reconcile all of your balance sheet accounts, but just make sure you've got a lead sheet, a work paper that is reconciling and has the underlying detail that use, like, the deliverable, in my opinion, that is audit ready is you go to any balance sheet account and you have some sort of underlying work paper that becomes its sub ledger, if you will, that you could pass off to Jeremy and say, go audit this and make any selections you need. Like that's kind of like the end state or deliverable of that I would say, of just like, that's what it kind of means to be audit ready, in my opinion.
Yeah. And actually, Nick, I was just chatting with Steven about this earlier, but like usually, and you touched on this, Alex, is like the key things when we come in is like, are we clear on the revenue recognition, right? That's key, right? Are we aligned on how the company's going to recognize revenue? And like, can we get together some sort of documentation kind of supporting that in line with ASC 606? And then the other area is equity, right? Like, do we have our arms around, all the various equity arrangements? Presumably the company has preferred stock. Is there any debt? Are there, convertible debt, warrants, those kind of things? Do we have our kind of arms around the capital structure? And those are the two big areas. I say if we can get revenue and like capital or equity kind of under control, yes, we can work our way through the accruals. We need to make our way through that, but that's things like accounts payable and accruals are like easier, I think, to figure out than revenue and equity in my experience. So
I might actually disagree a little bit there and say that,
Yeah.
like, while the things that Jeremy just mentioned, far more technically challenging from the accounting standpoint. Usually teams kind of getting ready for that first audit, may not have just like the accounting expertise or bandwidth in-house to really nail down equity accounting, rev rec, whatever it might be. Whereas it may be more operationally challenging to make sure you're on an accrual basis and you've got everything kind of like working and you've got those underlying schedules. Like it's actually easier to do that from a true technical standpoint. And you can spin your cycles there versus maybe some of that really tricky technical accounting stuff that, like, you learn in your CPA exam and forget about unless you are a lifelong auditor like Jeremy and you go to sleep reading this codification. I actually use that time as a hey, PwC, you are the true experts. I'm a CPA, but I'm not the brightest CPA in the room. I don't know the codification left in and out, and so I actually oftentimes use them as a talking point, right? Say you just bounce ideas off of them and help work together to get to the right answer. And usually what that looks like is we come to the table with what we think is our answer. Might not be perfect, but then a good audit partner, I think, can help you kind of get across that finish line and get it right.
yeah, and we actually say, Alex, that's like if we're just doing an audit and giving you an audit opinion, we're not doing it. We're doing a disservice. Like we should be a resource, like an extension of your team to bounce those kind of technical questions off of, give you recommendations around processes and controls and even operational topics as we see them. So like that's where you really get the value. And we may get into this at some point, but that's where I would say you get more value from the bigger firms. Obviously, we think we do this well at PwC, but just in general, the bigger firms, I think you'll probably get more value than just an audit. Any audit firm can give you an audit opinion. The question is like, what is it worth? Kind of at the end of the day. So, but that's my take on it.
Love it. And that's a great segue. There was a question a great question in the audience from Ahmed, talking a little bit about, we can all feel on this sort of call, I think, the partnership between you two over the years. And then Ahmed asked specifically here whether one should actually rotate audit partners and how to maintain independence basically over a course of a relationship. And again, maybe just the counterpoint to sort of what maybe folks here feel in the room, like how do you actually balance that side of the house, which is a phenomenal question by Ahmed.
So yeah, so I'll start. So in the private company space, kind of pre-IPO, it's rare you would rotate partners. The only times that like we do that sometimes is if there's like that partner has reached like capacity, like they can't properly serve that client anymore. But there's not strict rules around like when that partner needs to rotate. There's kind of a loosely followed 10-year kind of rule, but even that can be extended kind of thing. So what we like to say is like if you're with me or with the right partner at whatever firm, like we're the partner that can serve you today as like an emerging growth company, but can also serve you through the IPO and when you're public. So I have public and pre-IPO clients. So we typically don't push, at least at PwC, for any partner rotation prior to an IPO. Once the company's public, then you're subject to the SEC rules. So those rules mandate at least every 5 years that there's a partner rotation. And that's just, that's the government rules. So you can't really, there's no flexibility there. But what we will do is, we'll bring in that kind of next partner to maybe shadow, towards the end of the 5-year period for a public company. So they make the transition like a little bit smoother when that partner times out at 5 years. Also in connection with an IPO, sometimes what we'll do is, because the years that are included in the S1 or S4, depending on the IPO, count towards that partner's 5 years. So if you're an emerging growth company, you have the 2 years in the S1, then those are 2 years that they've lost. So that partner can only stay on for 3 years once the company is public. So sometimes we'll bring in 2 partners to kind of enable a little bit smoother of a transition, knowing that that partner that signed the IPO can only be there another 3 years. So a little different rules in the public company space versus private, but I would say in the private company space, we like to keep partners on with the client as long as we can. It's usually up until an exit event is how we do it. But I don't know if you have any different thoughts, Alex, kind of on that.
Yeah, no, I think to answer its question of, how do you balance it? I think from my standpoint, as you grow with the auditors, I think it's good practice to try to take a first stab at everything, get it to 80% of the way, whether it's accounting memos or decisions that need to be made. Get it 80% of the way. Like do your legwork to try to figure that out on your own as a business. And then let the auditors tear it apart if they need to, or agree with you, or enhance it if they can. But I think balancing that kind of like independence that you had raised is, as you grow, I think you're just willing and able to take on more yourself before kind of passing off to auditors and ask them to say, hey, can you go do this for me?
Awesome. Thank you. Cool. I'm going to stick with audience questions. We have a very engaged crowd here. We can go back to the script here shortly. So we have a question here from Anupam. Hi, Anupam. I think Rillet customer as well. So it was great to see your name pop up here. He's asking about accounting team sizes. And so a lot of the promise, even like taking a step back of Rillet, is like grow your company 5-10x. While keeping your accounting team the same, for example, or like only marginally expand it. So, and with that sort of software helping, but also like the profession in general, maybe getting slightly less inbound applications and new entrants as it used to, how do we deal with, or how do auditors get comfortable with internal controls when natural separation of duties are a bit more challenging? And any tips there as sort of like maybe also then from you, Alex. I know you have very strong ambitions there too, of like
I have the
keeping
exact
a
same
team.
question as I have the exact same questions. This is great. This is falls squarely
Cool.
on Jeremy to give me an
All
answer
right,
here.
Jeremy, all spotlight is on you. Great.
Yeah, so I think you know, we see the full gamut. Like I've done first year audits where it's just a CFO, you know, we have to do more hand holding. Sometimes they're better, you know, leveraging a Rillet or leveraging a technology platform or not. Sometimes there's firms, I think somebody had a question on this, where you can bring in a firm to kind of support, you know, the process. You know, there's firms that specialize in this exact topic, like CFGI, cross country, those kind of firms. They can kind of supplement the internal team to kind of help you get through that first audit. So I think it can be a mix of leveraging technology, leveraging external resources, or leveraging the audit firm. I would just say, you know, if you're leveraging the audit firm themselves, you're gonna run into some roadblocks in terms of independence, you know, the firm's bandwidth. So like, you know, we will help as much as we can, you know, kind of in terms of the audit firm, but there's some things that we can't do. We can't write the accounting memo. We can't record journal entries. You know, that's illegal. So you run into, you know, some limits in terms of what the audit firm can do. But again, the more you're leveraging technology, I love what you guys are doing in this space, Nic and team. But you know, or you could leverage people, you know, in terms of consultants. But it can be done. It's just a question of, I'd say, how much of a distraction from the team's day job it is. We know that an audit, you know, is not other than me, is not somebody's day job. So, so you know, you want to make sure you're not distracted too much from the business, and that's always my goal, is to like make this as least disruptive as possible, knowing that, like, you know, we want you to focus on the business, your business. This is an exercise you need to do. It'll help the company mature, but it's not your day job. So, anything to add to that, Alex? What do you think?
I don't, sadly, no.
Okay. I guess
The vision is for eventually to be able to run a billion ARR or plus on like an accounting team of 1 or 2 people, right? So like, question is, what do we need to do technically and then sort of structure wise for us to get there over time?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, there was another question that was a little spicier. Jeremy, we'll keep you in the hot seat
Yeah.
for a second around who. Let me just grab the name of the person that asked. Um, Actually, I don't have the first name here, so maybe my M pool. I'll give you the spicy version. Actually, I'm not even going to water it down. Big Four seems like an overkill to establish for an early stage company. Perspective on cost approach, like agree or disagree, and I think you had some views there already baked in. So we'd love to share a lot your perspective.
Yeah, I would say that, like, the way you should know that the big four firms, we do this at PwC, but we all do it, is like we're looking to make a deep investment, you know, to kind of build a long-term relationship. So where we see a company that we think has the ability to scale, potentially go public, you know, look, that may be a 20, 30, 40, 50 year plus relationship if the company really is successful. So you know, we're willing to make deep investments in fees. I think sometimes you can get a big four firm for less even than you might get a smaller firm, because the smaller firms, you know, if you think about it from their perspective, some of them don't even work with public companies, right, these days. So like their relationship may only be so long, so they kind of have to make money earlier. Whereas, like, you know, for me at PwC, we're a huge firm. We can make deep investments. We can like choose some, you know, we'll work with some companies that won't make it. We'll work with some companies that'll do fantastic. We can place some bets kind of out there. And in doing so, we can like deeply discount our fees. And I would think you would get more value from that. The other thing, obviously, I'm not a banker, so I can't, you know, tell you for sure this happens, but I do think at an exit event, like if you're going to go public, you will hear from the bankers. You should have a big four accounting firm that you will hear. But even in a sale, I've seen, you know, where a buyer may value those financial statements or have more comfort in them if they see kind of a big four firm behind them. So I know early stage companies aren't thinking, or may not be thinking every day about an exit event, but that will come at some point, most likely. And so, you know, getting ahead of it and having that relationship in place with the right firm could help you down the road. You want to make sure you're getting the right balance, again, the right partner that's not going to over audit the company based on the stage you're at. And you want to make sure their fees make sense, obviously, based on the stage that you're at. But that's the way I would think about it. I wouldn't think of a big four firm as, you know, necessarily more costly or, you know, more than you need. Again, if you find the right partner at the firm, you won't be over audited, you know, compared to the smaller firms. But any other thoughts on that, Alex? Or
Yeah. I first caveat, like I did not grow up through the ranks through Big Four. So I'm not in kind of an all hail Big Four kind of person. Like there are folks out there. I say that, and I just told you all that in the last decade, I've only used Big Four. But to give you context, like, you know, I've during our RFP process, I'm not exclusively looking at Big Four. Contrary to the question, actually, and a bit surprising 10 years ago for me, coming out of public accounting, Deloitte was the cheapest option for us. Fast forward through 2.5, 3 years ago, when I hired PwC, PwC was the cheapest option. And we did have regional top 20 big CPA firms pitching and vying for the business. So I'm here kind of on the, you know, the operating side, kind of saying like that is what happens in actuality. And you can see that the Big Four in the last two goes of this that have done, both Deloitte and PwC make a clear investment up front in hopes, of course, that we continue to grow, progress, that we start, you know, bringing them up for IPO readiness, and you've got that eventual exit. So I kind of make it up on the back end there. And so for me, the second part of all this is not only cost, again, a bit surprising for me when I started this, you know, process of hiring an auditor 10 years ago, was outside of them being actually more favorable on the economic side, you then have just the breadth and depth of a Big Four, where, you know, Jeremy might not know all the answers to our really complex equity accounting situation, and he'll call the right person, and the next day we'll get on a call with the person who just lives and breathes this all day long. So that's where I have found the value working with the Big Four from an earlier stage business, where, you know, economically it makes sense, and it seems like you get bigger, broader access to a lot of talent.
Yeah, and I can also, from our side, we're also an early stage business in the scheme of things. Very fortunate to be partnering with a team here at PwC with a very similar calculus. It's sort of like I think some of these bigger firms can allow to invest in the future of a company, and you establish long-term partnership and broad expertise early. Which, if you think long-term to like, if you have very large ambitions as a company, I think it's good to get started early, and it's maybe the wrong spot to save the. It wasn't even like, it was actually economically even very viable, but I think you would potentially be the wrong spot to save money at this juncture, or like at this part of the business. But again, everybody has their own opinions. But for us, that was also very clear, personally. In terms of the journey that sort of folks are on, there's a few questions here in the room from Amel and Daniel. Good to see you guys. That I think we implicitly answered at sort of the first audit cycle. So I'm going to progress us in the journey towards sort of the second go around of an audit. I think, Alex, this is pretty topical for you as well. So would love to hear a little bit there on like how the first and second audits differ, and how can you make the second audit the best after you've kind of gone through the first one.
Yeah, to some of those questions that I had seen in the chat there, that first year audit, you are struggling through quite a bit of, in my opinion, more of the technical side of the house. Not prepaids, not fixed assets, not cash, but it's revenue recognition, internal use software, you know, capitalizing software costs, capitalizing commissions, stock-based comp, equity accounting, things like that. You go through a bit of a painful, yeah, unless you come fully prepared to the audit. We did not. We again kind of leveraged, you know, our auditors to help us kind of get across the finish line for some of those areas during the audit. But you do all of that work, and assuming continuity on the audit team and no kind of like colossal shifts in your business, Year two, all of that challenging work is behind you, so long as during the year you kept up with kind of, monthly reconciliations and revisited those things and didn't kind of stray from kind of what you agreed upon with the auditors. And so, we've now been through 4 years worth of audits with PwC in the 2.5 years that I've been here. And every single time it is just easier and easier and easier. I think that's a big goal of mine that I kind of stress with the team is, hey, that learning that we had during the audit last year, let's not have that be a finding next year. Like, let's go fix some of the root causes or issues during current year, so that we don't even we don't run into that same internal use software issue that we ran into last year. And so it's being a sponge in that first year, going through a bit of the pain, and then just making sure you implement some of those changes so that you know what you're getting into the next year, right? There's almost like no excuses in year two, unless it's time and bandwidth. Then you have different challenges to face there. But at the end of the day, you know exactly what they're looking for after just that first year, and you get through a lot of that grunt work.
Yeah, just to add to that, Alex. So I think, like, I often say, like, the first year audit, you obviously need to get through the audit work, but the heaviest lift is actually like that first set of financial statements. So, we'll share when we work with a new client, we have a shell, depending on the industry the company's in, of the financial statements. We'll share those shells kind of with the company, but you still need to build. Every company's different. You still need to, set up the presentation of the primary financial statements. You need to build the footnotes, which will look different from one company to the next, kind of from scratch. So that's a pretty heavy lift, actually. And once that's in place, though, then, in subsequent years, you're rolling it forward. So, like, after that first year, you can just roll forward the financial statements, becomes much easier. The other thing, and Alex touched on this, is like, it's kind of that first year is like, you're it's a bit of a training ground. The audit firm will have new people to working with the company. They don't know each other. They don't know how to work best with each other. Not exactly sure what the support should look like. So you're kind of training the audit team, and then conversely, the management team isn't used to working with that audit provider, so they're not exactly sure what they want the support to look like. So it's kind of getting used to each other and what the expectations are in terms of audit support and things like that. That becomes, to Alex's point, like much easier, after the first year, and continues to get easier. The other thing you really want is, like, I sort of touched on this, but you want retention of the audit team members. So you want to make sure you're finding an audit partner, an audit firm that can keep good people. Because to the extent, they can't keep the people, and obviously, public accounting is known for turnover. To the extent they can't keep the people, it's going to make it more challenging for you. Not only is it more challenging for the audit partner, but you'll have to retrain the audit team members year over year. So I think finding that partner that is good to their team, is good to the client, and will keep the people around, is important as well.
One quick point, just to double down on it. I left this out. I was more tackling this from, like, the technical accounting side. The financial statements are a beast year one. And, from an independent standpoint, CPA firms should not be writing your financial statements for you. You might actually find some that do, that are smaller regional firms, which honestly could look as like a massive value, right? Could they actually just take that on for us? I would actually urge a lot of folks listening to, for lack of a better phrase, just take it on the chin, rip the Band-Aid off, and go after it from scratch, and build that, massive financial statement model that ultimately feeds into a Word doc that, you have version controls, and it's quite a nightmare. But that first year, spend a lot of time on that, because it's a major challenge, and you'll get that first draft to the auditors, and they will tear it apart, and they should tear it apart. They're reading it for the first time. You might not have had a lot of eyes on it yourself. And so I think going through that actually helps you, like, learn a lot about the business. You're writing footnotes. It's actually a good muscle to build, in my opinion, internally on your team. And I think is a good learning mechanism for folks in the org to really get their hands-on exposure building these financial statements. But yeah, I might put that at the top of the hardest thing to do in year one. Put technical accounting side, put converting from cash to accrual basis side, the actual building and writing of the financial statements is a total beast.
Yeah, I've done first year audits where, we've done a lot of the audit testing, all that, and the client might be like, are we almost done? I'm like, we haven't even started the financials. We're not almost done. You sort of need to get to that. It's that's the output, right? Is the audited financial statement. So until you get those together, you're not done. So
Yeah.
Love it, love it. Cool. And maybe on the journey that we're on here, basically all the way up to listing. Curious to hear from both of you guys around IPO readiness. What are sort of how does the auditor relationship change most notably leading up to that period? And what are sort of the tactical steps that one can do to prepare for an IPO? Maybe we'll start with you, Jeremy, or Alex, whoever wants to go first.
yeah, I can start off. So we do recommend doing a IPO readiness assessment when your best time to do that is going to be 18 to 24 months out from a potential IPO. We recommend doing that. If you use your audit firm to do that, at least speaking for PwC, we'll discount that significantly as well. And we would like it to be a holistic exercise. So a lot of us here are in the finance world, but we want it to be the whole company. So, everything from legal to HR to, capital markets, plan, and like the whole company, like because the finance and accounting side is a key part of IPO readiness, but it's really the whole company. It's a transformation. So we like to do a very holistic assessment. We'll do it very discounted. The only downside about using your audit firm to do that is, we or any audit firm will give recommendations, but we can't, if you're an auditor at PwC, we can't implement the changes for because it's an independence conflict. So what a lot of times companies will do is use a different firm to kind of come in and do that assessment, and then that other firm can kind of come in and actually help you action the recommendations that come out of the IPO readiness assessment. So sometimes it's kind of a joint effort. The audit firm can do it initially, but maybe with another firm plugged in to kind of action some of it. More often than not, I see, companies will pick their auditor and then they'll pick another firm to kind of come in and do the IPO readiness assessment, just so you maintain that sort of separation and you don't run into sort of independence roadblocks with the audit firm. And there's some really good firms out there that can do that. Obviously, all the big four firms can do that, but I would highly recommend taking a look at a CFGI, Cross Country, Connor Group, or some other firms that are like well known in the space for doing that kind of thing. There's others as well, so I don't mean to just plug them, but they do an amazing job kind of supporting transactions. So
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, from
How about yourself,
my
Alex?
perspective, one caveat, I have not taken a company public, but at my last company, I was kind of spearheading the IPO readiness journey. Before capital markets determined 5 years ago that was not the route we were going to go. I would say, even if an IPO is not on your 1 year, 2 year, or even 3 year roadmap, you can start thinking about what that means. In my day to day, I'm making decisions thinking about, will this help or hurt or slow down or speed up my future IPO exit? And so decisions today, whether it comes, whether it's technology or some controls or the team, governance, like whatever it might be, really any decisions I'm making now, even though we are as a business are not IPOing tomorrow, I'm actually thinking about it now. And of course, you need to balance we're not going to overkill this right now, right? We're not a public company today. We're not going to be a public company tomorrow. But even down the road, you of course have to balance that. I think striking a balance that I saw a question in the chat of like what leads to a successful audit somewhere. In my mind, if you start thinking and acting and kind of building out that public company muscle, you just start building good internal hygiene, good cadence, and you just start really thinking about this, and like that just naturally will progress you from my side to a good clean audit. We really think heavily. Again, we're not a public company. We're not a public company tomorrow, but that we're thinking about that in our future. We are starting to think a little bit more heavily about our quarters versus just like even our month end close. Of course, we're closing our books monthly. We table some of the less important, low risk, low dollar value reconciliations on months 1 and 2, and every month 3, end of quarter, we are building that out. So like starting to like just build those small little things you can do earlier on just helps that IPO readiness process at some point in the future.
That's awesome. Cool. We have a couple of minutes left. I want to maybe encourage people to ask any other questions in the chat. I think we implicitly hit on all of them, but if you have others, feel free to start dropping them in now. Maybe end on a sort of lighter note around audit horror stories. I think Alex, you had a pretty good one. Maybe Jeremy, you can redactedly also share any you have, but let's round us out there on a lighter note, lighter, harsher, but more fun note, I guess.
Yeah, from my standpoint, when I was asked about any sort of prior audit horror stories, I was brought back immediately to early days for me, out on site at a client, large public company, and we had somebody on our team who was microwaving fish every day for lunch, and the auditors asked us to not come back. That was that is the no real accounting, no numbers, no operations, but we were effectively kicked out of our client because we were microwaving fish in their cafeteria every day.
Too funny, too funny. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I've been doing this for 26 years, so I have a lot of a lot of horror stories over the years. But everything from companies I've done audits, like sitting in the company didn't have space back when we used to do everything in person. Sitting in a trailer, a cold trailer attached to their office. We try to get some heat in there so everyone's freezing. Trying to get the audit done that way, but. Kind of on the delivery side, I've seen everything from, kind of in the startup space. I've seen Alex touch on this, but companies that aren't ready. So they want to bring us in because they want like the help and the support, but they're not even close to ready. So I hate to admit it, but I've had audits where, we start it, they're not ready, and it doesn't happen much, but once in a while, it's just like, look, this isn't going to work. You guys aren't ready, and we're just never going to finish this thing. So, you kind of have to like sort of say, let's put this down and try again later. So that's a horror story just in and of itself, is people invested time and you don't actually get it finished. But that's rare, I would say. But yeah, it covers the gamut of sort of interesting stories over time. But
another one that came to mind as you were talking, this is again, no numbers, no operations here. I'm based in Boston, and we had a nonprofit client, one of my first jobs, and we were they're based out of the old State House, the home of the Boston Massacre. And the building was built in like 1710 or something like that. And we were stuck in the basement, and it basically felt like there was no electricity down there. And so auditors, I have love for the auditors, and respect, because I was once an auditor, and oftentimes aren't treated the best. And I probably fell victim to that myself of not treating my auditors the best, but they're ultimately obviously a good and important partner for us as we continue to grow.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you everybody for dialing in. It sounds like I think we did a pretty good job at sort of addressing all the questions live. So I'll round us out. Thank you for joining, everybody. I hope you got a little bit of a sense, or can find your own long-term true partner here for your audit. Ideally get that done before the 4th of July. I think that's sort of one other takeaway that I took away, just very tactically. Write your financial statements early, rip that Band-Aid off, and treat Jeremy well. Don't let him sit in a trailer or next to a fish microwave. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Any other questions? Feel free to reach out to the folks here on LinkedIn, Alex Brockman, Jeremy Budzian, or myself, Nic Kopp. I'm sure everybody's happy to chat and continue the discussion. Async.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for hosting, Nic.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks
Thank
everyone
you.
for. Okay.